please join me in welcoming Chuck Jackson.
Oh, yeah. Try to make up to me now. What's your problem? I'm trying to establish a little bit of intimacy in this crowd, and I invite you to weigh in, and you openly reject me. Don't you know I'm a stranger in town, and I'm scared to death. I speak across the nation day in and day out, but before I speak, I'm always terrified. And because I'm a counselor by training, I found it important that I openly admit to you my high levels of anxiety. I would like you to know what's going through me right now, and the best way I know to illustrate the point is to tell you a story of a little Japanese girl who had a similar set of emotions. You see, her father moved the entire family to America, and he wanted his kids to assimilate into our culture, so he enrolled them in public schools. And his little fifth grade daughter, first day of school, was terrified, much like myself. She wanted to impress her teachers. She wanted to make friends with the American kids. But from the very first moment she was ushered into the classroom, she was terrified. Because, you see, as she took her seat, an American social studies lesson was already underway. The teacher was standing before the class reading quotations from famous American heroes and then asking the students to raise their hand if they could properly identify to whom the quote should be attributed and the approximate date of its issue. Well, as the little Japanese girl nervously took her seat, the teacher read the immortal words, "Give me liberty or give me death." Teacher looks out at the class, and I'm embarrassed to report there's only one solitary hand waving in the air, and you know who it was. Only the little Japanese girl could identify the words of Patrick Henry, 1775. Well, the teacher reads another one. She reads, "407 years ago today," looks once more to the classroom to see a rerun. Only the little Japanese girl, straining at the edge of her seat, having recognized the Gettysburg Address, Abraham Lincoln, 1863. Well, the teacher's delighted to have such a bright new student in class, but frankly, she's somewhat embarrassed about the performance of the American children. So in an effort to get some of the rest of them involved, she decides to go with something a little more contemporary. She reads, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." I'm embarrassed to report it did not work. Only the little Japanese girl recognizes the inaugural address of John F. Kennedy, 1960. But I tell you what, a little American boy on the front row has had it about up to here with the new girl. And under his breath, he's heard to mutter the words, "Dadgum Japanese." To which the little girl and Donna responded, "Ooh, ooh, Lee Iacocca, 1981. Her mistake was trying to wow her audience with her expertise, and I just want to tell you early this evening, I'm not here as an expert. I'm only here as a person who cares. And I want to talk to you heart to heart. That's why I thought we'd do this weigh-in thing and establish some level of intimacy, but since it bombed big time, I brought up a backup lesson plan. And this is something I want to recommend to you for your own growth and as a way to develop intimacy with the important people in your life. I don't know if you've seen these books before, but if you haven't, I'd suggest you pick them up. They're getting to know you books. They're called the Books of Questions, and they're written by a fellow by the name of Gregory Stock, S-T-O-C-K. Dr. Stock says in America we often live and work with complete strangers. So he's helped us out by preparing lists of hundreds of questions that you can ask another human being in order to gain some quick insights into their personality and character. And since you wouldn't weigh in, I thought maybe by show of hands you could answer a few of these questions and let me know what kind of crowd I have to work with this evening. Would you do that? All right. First question. How many of you here tonight would have one of your fingers chopped off, surgically removed, if you knew it would grant you immunity from all major diseases for the rest of your life? Ma'am, I don't care which finger. Now, that was not part of the question. I only wanted to know if you would do it. You seem to be somewhat of an intellectual crowd. I was warned about Missoula and your intellect. Let me see the extent to which you value intelligence. Let me ask you this. How many of you here tonight would be willing to accept a disfiguring scar on your face that extended from the corner of your eye to the corner of your mouth in order to add 40 additional IQ points to your current level of intelligence? One taker in the room? I would do this too. I couldn't pass up a chance to double my score. I would do this. But it seems to me I've got a beauty before brain out on my hands tonight. Is that right? I wouldn't have guessed that. Maybe you have to see it from this angle, but I certainly wouldn't have predicted that response. How about this one? For a 2-week dream vacation to any place of your choosing on the planet Earth, all expense paid, How many of you would be willing to pull the wings off of a beautiful living butterfly? Whoa! Into animal cruelty, are we? It's a little unnerving for the speaker, I see. How about this one? How many of you would murder an innocent victim if you knew it would eradicate world hunger forevermore? Did you see her light up? You have somebody in mind. She goes, oh, yeah, no problem. Yes, yes, yes. How many of you would accept traumatic nightmares every evening for the period of 1 year? 365 consecutive traumatic nightmares in exchange for $1 million. These are the parents of teenagers. The parents of teenagers, they already have the nightmares. They say, pay us, right? How about this one? How many of you would like to know the day, hour, and moment of your own demise, when you're going to pass away? How many of you would like to know? I would too. I'd live my life differently. We're in the minority, but I'd live my life differently. Now, I don't want you to take this personally, you know, but if I knew I were checking out tomorrow, do you really think I'd be in Missoula, Montana today? I'd be out charging things somewhere, personally. My motto would be American Express, don't leave life without it, would be my approach. Now, you all, those questions came from the adult book of questions, and personally, since I've got two teenagers, a 15-year-old and an 18-year-old, we keep this book in our van, in the glove box. And when we're moving down the road, we ask questions of our own kids, and we gain some insights into their development. There is also a kid's book of questions that are targeted toward young people. Probably my favorite question in the kid books reads, you are on a camping trip with your father and your best friend, and both of them inadvertently step into a nest of poison vipers and are bitten repeatedly about the ankles. You rush to your first aid kit, only to discover you only have one antidote. Who will you give it to? Your dad or your best friend? Now, I was working with a group of 7th graders in Tulsa, and I'll never forget this young man looked at me rather thoughtfully and said, you know, Mr. Jackson, I believe I'd hang on to it. It sounds like dangerous territory to me. It's kind of what it's like with teenagers. It's every person for themselves. And then my second favorite question in the kids' book I want to ask of you tonight, because more than any other question that we've shared so far, it will give me the greatest amount of insight into your character. I'd like to know, of those in attendance tonight, how many of you have ever farted and blamed someone else? Anybody want to change your seat now, given that information? A friend of mine says that's why we have a dog. Now, I lost one of my books, and I sent my son to the store to get me a replacement, and guess what? There have been 2 more sequels. Dr. Stock has written one called Love and Sex, and that was very interesting. And there's another one called Business, Politics, and Religion. What is it? Ethics. Business, Politics, and Ethics. You might want to look into them as a way to gain some insights into the people that you love and care about. Because, you know, really, tonight, the reason I'm here is to talk about who we are. A lot of people ask me why I'm no longer a principal. I want to confess that up front. You see, I became a Christian and felt like I should give it up. I didn't have the morals for the job anymore. Well, school administrators don't think that's funny. But that's okay. I pray for them because they can repent right up to the moment of death. But the problem is old principals never die. They just lose their faculties. You know. That's the warm-up. It doesn't matter what I do next. It's getting better. This is by design. This is by design. No, the real reason that I'm here tonight and that I'm on the speaking circuit is because I'm like angry. As I look around the room, I see a lot of you are in midlife, like myself. I turned 40 in December. Thank you very much. I'm worried a little bit because, you see, prior to 40, I took great comfort in blaming the generation that went before me for everything. But now I'm in charge, and it's terrifying. The governor of my home state, Oklahoma, is exactly my age. We are in charge. And it started to dawn on me that my generation was in charge a few years ago when I was at a principals convention, and I could only take about a half day of this convention. That's my tolerance for school administrators' conventions. Half day and I'm out of there. Now this one was held in our nation's capital, and so it was quite a treat for me because, you see, I'm a dedicated tourist. Anybody else in the room devout tourist? Are you? I mean, devout? Do you get the shakes when you approach a historical marker? Yeah, you drool. She drools, yeah. Those things that say Chief so-and-so blew his nose here in 1863, you know. I get all hyped. Now, my teenagers hate this about me. A couple of summers ago, we did Yellowstone National Park, and after like the 76 geyser and boiling mud pot, they said, Dad, we get the basic idea. There's hot water in the ground and it smells bad. Now, can we lay by the pool? Of course, I don't let them. I go on vacation to do serious work. In fact, I wake up my family at 7:30 every morning of vacation. I beat on the side of the RV and I sing the old Rawhide song. Remember that thing? I sing, roll in, roll in, roll in, keep that family rolling, rawhide, head up, move out, you know. My kids got so fed up with this. I don't understand. You see, I only have one vacation rule. I try to give them a break. Now, don't you think that's reasonable for a parent to have one measly rule? You know my vacation rule? We don't do on vacation anything we can do at home. Now, you can eat at home, you can pee at home, you can sleep at home, get in the van, we're going to the museum, we may not pass this way again, is my attitude. So, my kids, a couple of summers ago, went out and bought me a T-shirt. 6-inch hot pink letters across the chest declared me the tourist from hell. Now, can you imagine the tourist from hell loose on our nation's capital? I was convinced I could see every monument, memorial, and museum within the District of Columbia in one afternoon. Now, my strategy was to fly around the Capitol, rushing up the marble steps, glancing quickly at the statue or inscription, saying to myself, been there, done that, down the stairs, and off to the next one. And as I was charging around the mall in D.C., I had an experience that I'll never forget. I don't know if you've ever been there, but I charged up the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. Awe-inspiring place. I hit the top step, and I glanced at Abraham Lincoln, and his sorrowful eyes met mine, and I froze. And for some reason, a quotation from Abraham Lincoln hit me like a ton of bricks. Lincoln once said, "You cannot escape history." And what he meant by that was that each and every generation is judged by those who come thereafter. And for the first time in my life, I asked myself the question, how will my generation be remembered? What will they say about us when they write us up in the history books? And as I thought about the contributions of Abraham Lincoln, I asked myself the question, who would we leave a monument or a memorial to from our time? Besides Dan Quayle, I really couldn't think of a soul. But I was so uncomfortable at this thought, I had to let myself off the hook in some way. So I said to myself, I know the problem. My generation is too sophisticated to do hero worship. When anyone starts to elevate to hero status, we send out the Star and the Inquirer to get the personal dirt on them and cut them down to size. So I said there will be no memorials to a human being from my generation. But friends, that really didn't let me off the hook, because the next question I asked myself is that if we can't memorialize a person, is there a thought, an idea, a philosophy, a concept, an invention from my generation that could be etched in stone? Well, I don't know about you, but I couldn't think of a thing. But a couple hours later, as this question continued to haunt me, I found myself at the other end of the mall in the Smithsonian Museum of American History, where in the basement there is an exhibit dedicated to our generation. Now, the title is not yet etched in marble. In fact, it's displayed in hot pink neon on the wall. 3 words representing you and I. They read, a material world. You know what's on display? Objects. Toasters, microwaves, bicycles of unusual design, pottery. And it hit me like a ton of bricks, you know. Our founding parents said you have life, liberty, and the opportunity to pursue happiness, and my generation will be remembered by the bumper sticker that reads, he who dies with the most toys wins. We're the collector generation. I mean, we're convinced that if we can get us enough stuff, we'll be happy. Now, the reason that troubles me so much as a parent, as an educator, it seems to me that this collector generation is today treating its children like objects. Particularly in schools. I had to get out of the school system. Not because I was burnt out, but because I was angry and fed up. And because I am an American patriot, I think when you're angry and fed up, you are obliged to speak out. You see, I became a principal the same year that William Bennett became Secretary of Education in Washington, D.C., and the school reform movement began. And every convention I attended as an educator, there was one issue on the agenda, and you know what it was? How do we improve standardized test score performance? That's all anybody cared about. That's all my superintendent cared about. That's all my school board cared about. Well, that troubled me somewhat because I was beginning a dissertation. Judy was kind enough not to share this with you. I am listed in the Guinness Book of World Records for the longest doctoral program in the history of higher education. 12 years now. Had my first reunion last summer without having graduating. It's kind of embarrassing. But I started a dissertation about the same time I became principal. I guess that's why I never finished. But the dissertation is on stress-related anxiety in gifted adolescents. Now, before I could study the gifted, I had to determine who had the gift. And in an effort to do that, I had to look at IQ tests and achievement tests, the way that we sift and sort people in this culture. And as I looked at the research surrounding that test, I came upon some data that made me feel compromised as the person in charge of testing. You know what I discovered? There's a whole body of research trying to determine what an IQ or an achievement score will predict. Guess what we found? Yes, they will predict something, not nothing. They predict each other. If you want to know how well your kid will do on a test, give them one. And upon scoring it, you will know pretty well how they will do if you give them another one. It's true. But my friends, we've tried to correlate these tests to life, to like career success, on-the-job productivity, regardless of the career choice, personal happiness and adjustment. And they have no predictive value. Now, a lot of educators go, well, I know the problem. The problem is the test represents too small a sample of student behavior. Maybe what we need to do is to look at day in and day out performance, like grade point averages. Researchers have done that. You know what grades will predict? Other grades. That's it. No real-life prediction from GPAs. And if you don't believe this research, just go to a high school reunion and check it out for yourself. Now, don't laugh at that. They'll know you're old enough to have been. It's better to look kind of confused and say, I'm looking forward to my first one. And then to put icing on the cake, after I reviewed this research, I found myself in Boston for a curriculum conference. Once again, half day was all I could take. Noon, I'm loose on Boston, tourist from hell. I went downtown and I did the Freedom Walk. I went out to the harbor and saw the USS Constitution anchored there. Went to the Harvard campus for the Deluxe Educators Tour. And then ultimately ended up at the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library where I saw an artifact that changed my life forevermore. You know what's on display at the JFK Library? His high school transcript. Are you ready? John Kennedy did not make 1A high school in anything. Smart enough to be president, but doesn't know how to pad his schedule with something he could ace. Not 1A! Sophomore year, he had a D in American history, for a pizza. You Western Republicans think that's funny, don't you? C's in government and economics, an overall grade point average of 2.5. This Democrat was shocked. And then I looked down in the corner of the transcript, and there was a quick and dirty IQ score. Are you ready? IQ, 110, very much within the average range. Now, this is one of our first national advocates for speed reading. He was known to read somewhere between 1,300 and 1,600 words per minute. He surrounded himself with Harvard intellectuals. He not only was able to carry out the very heavy responsibility load of the presidency, but from all I read, he had a pretty active social life going on the side, you know? And the gallery in which this artifact was housed was a gallery dedicated to his childhood, and they piped in from the ceiling the voice of Rose Kennedy talking about little Johnny. And I asked myself the question, if I had been John Kennedy's principal, and Rose had been into my office for a conference, and I had that transcript on my desk, what advice and counsel would I have given? Oh, Mrs. Kennedy, it looks to me like we got a future president of the United States on our hands here, ma'am. Have you considered Harvard for the boy? Probably not. You know, I tease my Oklahoma educator friends. I say, shoot, if the boy had grown up in our state, we would have sent him to Votech, you know? Johnny, son, you ever think about working with your hands, boy? Would have been the Oklahoma vocational guidance that he would have received. And then I was hit with this impish impulse. I wanted to go to the payphone and call Washington. I had fantasies of being patched through to Lloyd Benson of Texas. I was going to say, Senator Benson, you know, Dan Quayle may be a lot more like Jack Kennedy than any of us thought, big guy. You know, you're not laughing at the Dan Quayle stuff. This influenza getting to you or what? No, I got too many Republicans in the crowd, right? Well, look, I'm an equal opportunity speaker. If I got Republicans here, I'll take a shot at the Democrats, but I want you to know my heart's not in it, okay? But for the Republicans here, you can tell this at your next party meeting. Do you Republicans know who the first Democrat was? Christopher Columbus. You know why? Because when he set sail, he had no idea where he was going. When he got there, he didn't know where he was. Nevertheless, he came home proud, not knowing where he'd been. Now, if there's any doubt about the man's political affiliation, let me point out he did the entire enterprise on borrowed money. Kind of removes all doubt, doesn't it? Dang. Like that. Hurts, that hurts. But anyway, as I looked at the transcript, I asked myself a rather painful question. You see, I devoted 15 years of my life telling young people that their grades and their test scores would dictate their entire future. And I had to ask myself the question, what does a transcript really represent? And I'm afraid it represents a scorecard on a game called school that we put together and we play 18 to 20 years and we launch people into life, ready or not. And then the thought occurred to me that what Rose Kennedy was saying about the values that she tried to teach Johnny probably was a better predictor of his leadership ability than anything on the transcript. So tonight, those of you who have come here in the parenting role, I would just like to say to you, you are your child's first and most influential teacher. And the problem is no one trains us to do the job of parenting. A little lust and a little luck and bingo, you're a parent, ready or not. That's why I'm so thrilled to look at this crowd. We've got 800 people here tonight who care and are committed to talk about this issue. And not only that, but we have someone over here already raising her hand. And I love this. You see, I'm not a podium speaker. I like to talk with the audience, and I'd like to hear what's on your mind.
Yeah, well, I'd like to know why the teenagers are going in for drug and alcohol counseling and being put on psychotropic drugs, saying that they're crazy.
Oh, yeah, isn't that interesting? You obviously have a drug problem. Let me prescribe you something. Yes, that is ironic. You see, the issue that you're raising here is one that I raise in my own mind. You know, everybody wants to talk about declining test scores and how they compare with the Japanese and the Germans, but we're not looking at our children as human beings and some of the issues.
Then test them.
Yeah, we have to dope them up first and then test them, she says. We're not looking at some of the really pressing issues. The statistics that bother me far more than a decline in SATs have to do with the lives of our children. Like school has become so irrelevant that our kids give up a free public education. You see, I'm not opposed to education. I value it. I'm a lifelong student. But I just think that the way we do it doesn't prepare people for life. We now have a 29% dropout rate in this country. Do you know that? 1 in 3 kids do not finish high school today in America. I don't know if you knew that. Do you know our other symptomatic behaviors? Do you know that we now lead the industrialized world in teenage pregnancy? We had 1 million teenage pregnancies last year, 500,000 teenage abortions. And substance abuse, the issue that you raise. By the 18th year in this country, what we have is 70% of our young people have tried drugs. We have 90% that have experimented with alcohol, and 50% of them drink on a regular basis.
Psychiatrists say, oh, there's nothing wrong with you. You're just crazy, so we'll prescribe drugs, and they'll be legal drugs, and we'll just dope you up so that you don't speak out and you're not a problem anymore.
Yeah. What we do is we always look for the quick fix and the easy answer. If we can medicate you, maybe we won't have to deal with some of the things you're struggling with. And we've done that in drug and alcohol education. You heard in the introduction that that's something that I'm very concerned with. You know, when we do our drug education efforts, it's interesting. In this culture, adults use drugs, and then we tell kids not to. And of course, one of the things that we try to do is to scare kids out of drugs and alcohol abuse. In fact, our first drug education programs are rather comical. I don't know if you had them here in Montana, but in Oklahoma, did you have Operation Scare, where you invited the local sheriff to come to the high school to scare the kids? That's what we did in Oklahoma. We go down to the sheriff's office and we say, Sheriff, We need you to come down to campus and scare these kids. Well, they were all too obliged. They had this wooden confiscated paraphernalia kit. You remember these things? They would wheel them out on stage and open up the drug kit. And boy, did they do drug education. They taught the kids all the drugs available on the market today, their effects, how much they cost, how to use the paraphernalia, where they could be secured in your local community. And then they would waggle a finger and say, don't do this. This is dangerous. Well, any of you who live with young people know that when you're young, you feel immune, and you also feel challenged to engage in dangerous behavior and survive it. Drug use shot up in response to the scare tactics. So when we couldn't scare them, we decided to charm them. We took a Madison Avenue approach to fighting drugs and alcohol. That's when we put together our Just Say No campaign. Just say no. What did you say? No? You will not say no to me. You will do what you're told. Now just say no. Oh, yeah. A friend of mine says he thinks the Just Say No campaign did about as much for drug addicts as the Have a Nice Day campaign did for manic depressives. We don't ask why people self-medicate. Yeah. We don't ask people why they self-medicate. We just tell them not to. And then probably the most painful statistic that I think there is available to us today has to do with the way young people die in our culture. Do you know? Number one cause of death in American adolescents are accidents, and most of them are related to drunk driving. Number two cause of death, some of you are whispering, suicide. And last year, for the first time, number three cause of death, murder. You know, they say you can evaluate a culture by the condition of their young and their old. How are we doing? Well, tonight what we're going to do is to talk a bit about the mental health of our culture. And we're going to focus on the issue of self-esteem. And by that I mean just having a strong sense of personal identity and valuing who you are to the extent that you could walk in front of a speaker and take your seat without the slightest bit of reticence. I like that in a person. I like that in a person. But we're not going to have one-way communication tonight. In fact, right now, you've launched what I hope will be a discussion for the auditorium. I think we can talk, even though we have 800 people here. We can do a Donahue kind of thing. What I would like to do is to get some of your ideas about self-esteem, and the way I'm going to kick off this discussion is with a song. Now, don't panic. I will not be singing it myself. I was labeled by my first grade teacher as musically impaired. I'll never forget it. It was the third week of first grade, and the lady was pounding away at the piano when we were singing Itsy Bitsy Spider, and she froze halfway through the first verse, turned to the class and said, "Who is that?" And when no one raised their hand, she said, "Boys and girls, let's try that again." And she cocked a diagnostic ear to the side, and after 2 or 3 measures, she stopped and she said, "Chuck, honey, is that you? Come here, darling." And she tried to tune me at the piano. After 2 or 3 unsuccessful attempts, she said, "Never mind, sweetheart, go sit down." So as you can see, I brought my boombox tonight. I'm going to play for you a self-esteem song, and then I want us to critique it. Now, warning, you've heard this song before, maybe hundreds of times. The name of the song is The Greatest Love. You know it? Greatest Love? And the artist that does this rendition is Whitney Houston. Now, I personally have some fantasies about Whitney Houston that aren't appropriate for this session. I hope to be appointed to the Supreme Court someday, and well, I wouldn't want you to have to testify against me, and you're looking at me like you think it couldn't happen. Well, I'd like to remind you that a lot of people much less qualified than myself have been appointed to the court. It could happen! But the reason I want to warn you about Whitney Houston is that she sings with such incredible passion that people get caught up in the emotion of the song and they don't listen to the lyrics. That's not your job tonight. Put your heart on hold. I want you to listen to the words of the first verse, and I want everyone here in attendance to be prepared to answer the question, do I agree?
I believe the children are our future. Teach them well and let them lead the way. Show them all the beauty they possess inside. give them a sense of pride to make it easier. Let the children's laughter remind us how we used to be. Everybody's searching for a hero. People need someone to look up to. I never found anyone who fulfilled my needs. A lonely place to be, and so I learned to depend on me. I decided long ago never to walk in anyone's shadows. If I fail, if I succeed, at least I live as I believe. No matter what they take from me, they can't take away my dignity, because the greatest love of all is happening to me. I found the greatest love of all inside of me. The greatest love of all is easy to achieve. Learning to love yourself, it is the greatest love of all. I believe the children are our future. Teach them well and let them lead.
All right. You may have thought I was bluffing like the bathroom scales, but I was not. I would like to see an opinion expressed by everyone in this auditorium. I hope you won't fear expressing an opinion. It amuses me that Americans sometimes will not express an opinion. A Russian will stand in front of a tank, but an American won't raise their hand. Here's what I want to do. I want you in attendance to use their thumb as an approval indicator tonight. When I say go, if you agree 100% unconditionally with what you've just heard, I'll expect to see a thumbs up sign from you. If, however, you reject the thesis of the first verse, show me a thumbs down. Now, should I have any smart aleck critical thinkers in the crowd whose position lies somewhere between the extremes, I will just invite you to crank your thumb up to whatever level of commitment you feel. So the way that works is I don't buy any of that garbage. Well, maybe a little. I guess I buy about half, most but not quite all, and I buy. Now, I'd like to point out this is not for a grade. You may look at your neighbor's work. Ready? Go! Get him up high and look around and see what kind of crowd we have tonight. Ooh, skewed distribution. You are here voluntarily. My goodness, this is shocking. It looks to me like I've got like 85% of you giving the song full endorsement. The lowest rating I saw in the room was a 50-50. Is there someone out there lower than that? You'll need to wiggle your thumb. Lower, where are you? All the way down. Not one thing you can buy. You buy just a tiny bit, and the gentleman in front of you buys just a tiny bit. So it seems like the lowest point on the distribution is two people who say, I buy a little bit. Lower than that? Is that total? Just a little bit. Three people. More than that? You buy a little bit? About a quarter. Okay. I'm assessing between 5 and 10 people gave it less than half. 85% gave it full endorsement. The rest of you seem to be somewhere between 50% and full endorsement, somewhere in that range. Well, you know, I guess I have my work cut out for me tonight. Even though I value self-esteem highly, I cannot give this song full endorsement as many of you did. There are many ideas in this first verse that trouble me. And what I'd like to do is to see if I'm on the same wavelength as those of you who had objections. Now, here's the courageous part. Is there anybody in this auditorium who didn't give it full endorsement that'd be willing to tell us why? Yes, ma'am. Oh, did that bother you? That line that says, it's easy to achieve. Yeah. So why wouldn't you get on the bathroom scale? You see, that was a pretest to determine whether or not you needed any work in the area of self-esteem. Your weight is a 3-digit number. Are you afraid of it? Yes. You see, yes, she says. Yes, she admits it. With high self-esteem, we would stand on the scale and have a Popeye philosophy of life. I am what I am, and that's all what I am. But many of you fear that scale because you think there's an ideal weight that you should weigh. So you should on yourself. You say, oh, I really should weigh less. I've got a poster in my office that says, I will not should on myself today. There was a psychotherapist by the name of Albert Ellis, and he says that's one of the biggest problems Americans have. We create high levels of dysfunction and anxiety because we're so hard on ourselves. With shoulds and oughts and musts. It must be this way. He calls that mental masturbation. When you don't know how to accept yourself. You see, my doctor says I should weigh 155. Well, I don't. And I can't right now. Now, I can change what I weigh, but not right now. I weigh 204 pounds. I agree with you. It's not easy. And you know the problem. The people in our generation were not raised to have high self-esteem. In fact, I don't know about your parents, but my parents didn't believe in just say no. In fact, I hope this will serve as a point of identification. What I'd like to do is to share with you a little bit about my humble beginnings. And in order to do that, I brought a picture from the family album. Now, I know this is right after dinner, but I'm going to risk it anyway, okay? Here I am, Charles Ray Jackson, age 4.5. Oh, dadgummit. I always get the sympathy routine. You hear that? I hold up that picture and people go, oh. You know, I wish once I could raise that photograph and have someone say, ooh. But that photograph causes great embarrassment to me. Someone asked me one time, why do you have such a large photograph of yourself? Well, it's embarrassing to admit, but as a child, I was a poster child. At age 4.5, my own mother nominated me to be poster child for Planned Parenthood. Well, that will affect your self-esteem. It will. And you notice the darkened area at the bottom. That's where I blotted out the white letters that read, this too could happen to you. I don't know how to describe myself other than to say I was a little geek. Now, do you know what a geek is? That's a kid who pretty much does what they're told, you know? They're approval junkies. And you might ask, why does the man hold up a geek example to us? Well, look around the room. Geeks are typically the folks who come to these seminars, you know? We're the people who are trying to get it right, or you wouldn't be here, right? And I want to show you how much we have in common. Here's what I'd like to do. I would like to do for you the family dialogue that was used on me as a child, and if you recognize this dialogue from your own past, will you join in with me, and we'll do a choral thing together, okay? Get ready. Anything you recognize, jump in on. Oh, young man, you want to get along in this family, do you? Well, you need to understand a few basic rules. As long as you live under my roof. Oh, you're going to be good at this. You're going to be good. As long as you live under my roof, it would behoove you to do exactly as I say. When I say it. Why? Because I said so. That's why. And if you don't, young man, you will wish you had. You were dead. Who said that? Somebody over here said, wish you were dead. My parents weren't into capital punishment. You know, they stopped at corporal punishment. You must have a parent like Bill Cosby's. Remember what his mom said? Son, I brought you into this world, and I can take you out, you know. It was a real threatening, intimidating kind of upbringing that many of us received, and so we turn that on ourselves as adults. You know, you can't give away what you don't have. And if you care about empowering a kid, you better take care of yourself first. Because there's nothing more threatening to an insecure adult than a secure child. They'll just say no on you. And I don't know about you, but I got cocky from time to time. I felt entitled because, after all, I was a firstborn grandchild. Anybody else a firstborn grandchild? Raise your hand, right? We are holy people. Well, the reason I say that is because people go through a spiritual transformation when they become grandparents, you know. Bill Cosby says that his parents, now that they're grandparents, he doesn't even recognize them. He goes, these are not the people who raised me. These are old folks trying to get into heaven. Their whole value system has changed, you know. And I'll admit to you, my grandmother so desperately wanted a grandchild that when I was born, the woman was out of control. You may not believe this, but she bronzed my first bowel movement. I think that's where I got the idea that mine didn't stink. I could play with the thing, and it was up on the mantle. But what would happen to me is I'd spend the weekend with Grandma, and I would come home full of myself. And you know the dialogue then. Oh, I'd come prancing through the front door. Join in if you recognize it. Oh, young man. 48 hours with your grandparents. We're getting a little smart, aren't we? Seems to me you're getting just a little too big for your britches. I guess I'm going to have to bring you down a... Oh, is this a notch state? There are regional differences on this one. You notice I paused there. Oklahoma is a notch state. But I was in Mississippi, and they said, a peg or two. I was in Connecticut. They don't even wear britches. I'm doing this, and they go, you're getting a little too big for your pants, young man. There were pants up there. And they said, I'll have to cut you down to size. But the fact is, there was a generation of geeks that was dominated. And now we're in charge. And the frightening thing about it is the kids in America today, the younger they are, the better their self-esteem. But the older they get, the more we cut them down a notch or two. You know, when we measure self-esteem, and it's hard to do, but when we measure self-esteem, the group that has the highest self-esteem are kindergartners. 80% of kindergartners in this country think they hung the moon. You've read the essay, All I Ever Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. Robert Fulgham. Well, Robert said he was in a kindergarten classroom one time when he got the idea for this essay, and he was just asking the kids about their own competencies. And he had read them a story, and after reading the story, he said, before I leave today, it would be a real pleasure for me to sing a song with you children, and I was just wondering, do any of you all sing? What do you think they said? Oh, yeah, we sing. We'll sing for you, let's sing. He said, wonderful, but you know, it would be such an addition to this experience if someone could accompany us. I was just wondering, do any of you play musical instruments? What did they say? Oh, yeah, we play. Get them rhythm blocks, we'll play for you. And then he goes, whoa, he says, this could be like a total fine arts experience. We could dance along with this thing if some of you dance. Do any of you dance? Well, they say, oh, yeah, we dance. He said, well, what kind of dancing do you do? They said, any kind, mister. And he said, boys and girls, I'm so excited. This is a Kodak moment. But I forgot my camera. I was just wondering, is there anyone in this room who could illustrate this activity so I'd have a keepsake of our special time together? Do any of you draw? Well, they say, oh, yeah, we draw. He said, no, I don't mean scribble with crayons. I mean, you are an artist. You could draw an elephant eating a car in the jungle. They said, how big you want it? Kindergarten children are high on themselves, 4 out of 5, 80%. But do you know, by the end of elementary school, by the end of the 5th grade, we go from 80% to 20%. Only 1 in 5 American children have high self-esteem by the end of elementary school. And by the time we get to the senior year in high school, you can no longer hold up a finger. We only have 5% of our graduating seniors with high levels of self-esteem. Easy to achieve? I don't think so. And you know, I ask myself the question over and over again, what are we doing right with the babies? We got babies in the crowd tonight. Do you know that? We got a 4-month-old here and a 3-month-old back there. Let me ask you something. What do we do with babies that we don't do when they grow up? You tell me. They're with us, right? We are holding them right now while we listen to the seminar. The others we have encaged across campus. Everybody loves a baby. But my teenagers, no one has come up to me in the Walmart and said, would you mind if I held your boy? We have a whole different attitude with the little ones, and we teach them incredible amounts. You know, it's amazing to any kindergarten teacher how much the kids already know when they show up for first day of school. Do you know how many vocabulary words that an incoming kindergartner knows? 2,000 to 5,000 words in America. And some of our kids are bilingual by age 5. 2,000 to 5,000 words without a ditto sheet or a workbook. How did they acquire this knowledge? Well, parents taught it. And my, aren't you effective? How do you teach language? Well, the first thing you do is you model it. You talk to the kids, you talk over to the kids, you read to the kids, and they hear language. And they come to understand the person who can articulate the words milk and cookies are more likely to get some than someone who goes, oh, 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 oh. And the thing that amazes me with the little tykes is how little we're willing to settle for. I mean, they lay in the crib making random utterances. Linguists tell us most of the sounds of the languages of the earth are made in the crib. Google, gaga, blika, dugu, dugu, dugu. And then quite by accident, out come the syllables. Da, da. Did you hear that? My boy said daddy. I knew he'd said daddy before he said mama, the child is gifted. We're out of control with preschool performance. Or like a child learning to walk. Does that amaze you? I mean, kids. Ooh. You lost a leg, did you, ma'am? My attorney's used to it. But I mean, kids crawl around the environment and they come to understand that people on 2 feet make it to the milk and cookies first. So after having the behavior modeled, one day they decide it's worth the physical risk to attempt the activity. And for the first time in their lives, they pull up on the coffee table. And what do? Did you see that? My boy is walking. Is he walking? No. He is barely able to support his weight on the coffee table, and we are out of control. Well, psychologists have been studying learning, and they've come to understand that you parents have mastery over some very important learning theory. You see, when you say, my boy is walking, you're doing something called expectancy theory. You know, with children, you typically get what you expect. And when you call your son a walker, you're saying, I fully expect that you will walk. And by celebrating this small step in a positive direction, you're doing something called successive approximations. And that is every day you challenge a human being to take a growth step. And when they take a step in the right direction, you celebrate that progress. Now, you know what I fear? I fear that we lose this kind of affirmation when school begins. Because can you imagine how school would teach walking? That is no way to walk, young man. Have you not read the chapter on walking? The instructions are on the board. You are not walking up to your potential. You are not walking on grade level. I fear that you may be a non-walker. And you know, what would the instructional approach be to walking, you know? I know that we wouldn't allow coffee tables in school. They got sharp corners, right? They would be outlawed by the state legislature. So our vendors would have to produce educationally sound, orthopedically approved pull-up paraphernalia, right? And the schools in Missoula couldn't afford that, so the parents would have to sell world's finest chocolates to raise the money to buy the pull-up paraphernalia, right? And then our textbook publishers and our test publishers would have to issue a curriculum and evaluation systems. And the first time the child pulled up on the paraphernalia, the educator in charge would be responsible to evaluate their behavior and fill out a little computer grid that would be statistically analyzed, and then we would share the data with you. So I don't know how to put this delicately, but according to our research, your child has, how shall we say it, below average pulling up skills. But with an IEP and professional intervention, I think in 4 to 5 short years, we can have your child walking in the mainstream. Ooh, 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 ooh. Everybody's attitude changes when a human being starts school. We start to count you wrong instead of celebrating how you're right. Anything else about that song trouble you? Do you remember the song? Who else? Yes. End of the row, yes. No matter what you take from me, you can't take away my dignity. Those statistics bear you out, don't they? Kids start with affirmation and dignity, and they lose it the older they get. What else don't you agree with? Yes? Yeah. There's no one to look up to, no heroes, no one to fulfill my needs. Now, there's something I need to point out. This song was done for a movie called The Greatest, about the life of Muhammad Ali, and it's describing the world as he saw it. He felt like he didn't have any heroes, no one to look up to, but I'd like to point something out. Every child has someone to look up to, because when you're this tall, there's only one place you can look, up, and you walk in many, many shadows. I hate to terrify you, but according to research, you have about a 92% chance that your kids will turn out to be exactly like you. Oh, I'm sorry. I almost lost one here. Are you okay? Were you hoping for better? Well, I don't know. At 40, I look in the mirror and I see my dad. And when my kids make me really mad, my dad possesses my body. And I know it's him because I'm saying things I said I would never say. And I'm doing things I said I would never do. Our kids turn out to be like us. You know, my family likes to play games, and one of our favorite games is win, lose, or draw. It's like charades, except you use a sketch pad and you try to draw a little sketch to get someone to say a word or a movie title. Well, my extended family was playing, and we had the adults in sofas and couches around the perimeter of the room, and we put our preschool cousins down on the floor with blocks and puzzles and books, and they seemed to be engaged in their own little world as the adults played the game. But halfway through the evening, we stopped for refreshments, and one of my little 2-year-old cousins waddled up to the chart, picked up a marker, and scribbled. And we thought, isn't that cute? Her artistic talent is emerging. But she wasn't drawing, because after she finished scribbling, she turned to us and went, yeah, that's what we did. We laughed, and then I said, wait a minute. That's not funny. If this child in the center of the room, seemingly oblivious to our behavior, has picked up every subtle nuance of our movements, that is frightening. Now, there is one exception to the 92% rule, and I see some of you deliberating with it right now. If your parents are extremists, way out on the radical fringe, there is a 92% chance that the kid will be an extremist like them, or a flip-flop, mirror opposite of their parents. So I challenge you. Are you like your folks, or the opposite? But either way, you lived in their shadow, and their model helped mold and shape you. Any other objections to the song? Do you like the title? Loving yourself is the greatest love? I personally have problems with that. You know, it's a theological problem for me. I'm a very spiritual person, and I don't think self-love is number one. But that's kind of a personal opinion thing. I'd like to rename the song. I'd like to call it one of the greatest loves of all, because I don't think it tops the list, but I think it's vital and it's important. But here's what happens. A lot of times I go into communities, and there's this barrier of resistance in the crowd. Like if I suggest that before people can perform, they need to feel good about themselves, some people say, you have the cart before the horse. If you would only get these kids to perform, by golly, they would feel good about themselves. And a lot of times, school boards think if we just toughen the standards, then kids will feel better because they'll be accomplishing more and self-esteem will be raised. It need not be the agenda. But whenever I meet that kind of criticism, I like to do a scientific experiment. I am a recovering science teacher, and the Mr. Wizard is still alive in me. And what I'd like to do right now is a scientific experiment that will show you how performance is affected very much by one's opinions of self. And in order to do this, I need a volunteer from the audience. And the way the scale thing went over, I'm a little worried about this crowd. But there was one gentleman who jumped to his feet without a moment's hesitation when I brought out the bathroom scales. And as a result, he was diagnosed very early on as the volunteer for this activity. No. Come on, Brad. No. Come on, Brad. No. Come on, Brad. Go and do this. Come up here on stage. If you'll watch the cord, you can go up that way. All right. Now, you guys, This is a lot of pressure to be up here, and so we need to affirm Brad for this, and you heard the applause. But before we proceed, I do need to get your permission, Brad, for this group to use your body. Do you have any problems with that?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, it's not so bad. It's not so bad. Before you totally panic on me, I want to explain the exercise just a little bit. The last few years, psychologists have been studying the lives of successful people who seem to be happy and productive, and we've tried to determine what are some of the correlates. And I've already told you, IQ will not predict productivity or happiness, and GPA won't, but we have found something that successful people have in common, Brad. It's energy. Sometimes we call it drive, sometimes we call it motivation. In leaders, we call it charisma. But life is challenging, and it takes energy to attack life, and what we're trying to determine is what is it that gives people personal power. And so, Brad, what I want to do is to turn your body into a scientific instrument of personal energy. And it's not too bad, really. All you have to do is lend us the muscles from your strongest arm. You can do that, can't you?
Sir?
Yeah. Well, are you right or left-handed?
Right.
Right-handed. Good. Every once in a while, I get somebody up here who's ambidextrous, and I find myself quite jealous because, frankly, I'd give my right arm to be ambidextrous. But just checking to see if you're still with me. Brad, come here. Brad, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to ask you to extend your right arm, lock your elbow, and make a fist. Make a fist.
My strength isn't in my right arm, it's in my left.
What?
My strength is in my left.
Okay, all right. We're moving too fast for you here, Brad. We're going to have a little power struggle, Brad. What I'm going to ask you to do is to lift that left arm with all the strength, power, and energy you possess while I press down on it. Now, here's the trick. While Brad is attempting to lift his arm, I'm going to be asking him questions designed to affect his sense of self and psyche. I'm going to plant certain thoughts in his head, in his heart, and we're going to see which of these attitudinal conditions empower him as a human being and which ones take his energy away. Now, because you're a midlifer like myself, Brad,
Sir?
we might ought to rehearse this first question before we get into the physical struggle.
Sir?
To let you deal with it intellectually and emotionally.
Yes, sir.
The first question is going to be, who are you? See? That's a midlifer for you. You ask a midlifer the straightforward question, who are you? And they get existential anxiety. Who am I? Nothing that heavy, Brad. I just want your name. Who are you?
Brad Curtis.
All right, that's it. Now, make a fist. Now, what I'm going to do is to shout the question over and over again, who are you, who are you, who are you? And I want you to draw strength from your identity. Tell me your name, and let's see what kind of energy is available to you tonight. Who are you?
Brad Curtis.
Now, lift with all you've got. Who are you?
Brad Curtis.
Who are you? Lift, who are you?
Brad Curtis.
Who are you?
Brad Curtis.
Who are you? Probably wouldn't be a good idea to tick you off, would it, Brad? There's a lot of energy in that arm. A lot of energy. He could practically sustain my weight until he gave up. But let's complicate the issue a little bit here, Brad. What I'm going to do is to ask you the question once more, who are you? Except this time I want you to lie to me. Not a big lie, just a little fib. When I say, who are you, I'd like you to respond by saying, I'm Tom Cruise. What's funny about that?
Even close.
You don't see the resemblance. Squint your eyes just a little bit. I think you'll see it. Your eyelids may have to touch, but with a little fantasy work. All right. Brad, let's see what kind of power comes from being a Hollywood stud muffin. I'm going to say, who are you? You're going to say Tom Cruise, and I want you to give me all you got, Top Gun. Who are you?
Tom Cruise.
Now lift as you tell me. Who are you?
Tom Cruise.
You're who?
Tom Cruise.
You're who?
Tom Cruise.
You're who? Obviously another Hollywood wimp, right? And I want to ask you as an audience a question. Where did his energy go? What do you think debilitated him?
In a lie.
A lie. He knows. Do you know what? When we study successful people, the people who seem to almost be driven with energy are the people who have the uncanny ability to be themselves. When you live your life in a position of pretending to be someone you're not, it takes away your energy. And so many parents, we want to create our kids. instead of learning to accept our kids. Like my poor dad, he was so disappointed. Brad, he was born right after the Depression, and he had to go to work at age 9, so he didn't get to play sports. So his lifelong dream was to have his firstborn son to be a jock. Well, I learned to wear one, but I never became one, you know? But I went out for everything: football, baseball, basketball, track, trying to give Dad the athlete he so desperately wanted. I'll never forget, my dad was umpiring a Little League game, and he was hovering over the catcher's head while I stood nervously at the plate. And I'll never forget, this beautiful pitch came sailing down the pike and sizzled past me and snapped in the catcher's mitt. Now, Brad, I was an admirer of great pitches. I didn't see any reason to mess him up. The fellow had gone to so much trouble to hit this little target, you know. And I watched this beauty all the way in with great respect and admiration, and I'll never forget my dad. He screamed, "Stand right one!" And then under his breath he said, "Chuck!" Did I swing at the next one? Yes. 3 foot over my head. You see, I don't know if you can even accept yourself. My kids watch me all the time because I'm subject to adult peer pressure. You see, I'm not like the other people who live in my community. In my community, you know what happens? At age 16, my peers buy their kids new cars. My son came to me on his 16th birthday and said, "Dad, where is my car?" I said, "Son, I have no idea where your car is. I don't even know if they've made your car yet. Son, have you ordered a car? I didn't even know you had work." You see, being a geek myself, I have to find within myself the courage to be different than those around me because, frankly, I don't like what's going on right now. And one of the things I do to test myself in terms of my own ability to be different is to wear this getup. Some of you may have wondered, why does he present himself this way? Well, it's in order to experience rejection. This works for me. I put on the yuppie dress shirt and tie, and then superimpose overalls, and then walk into the world to see how I'm greeted and treated. Well, how do you think they responded to me in the Red Lion Inn this evening? I can look at people and speak, and they will not return my greeting. White-collar people will not speak to me because I have denim. Blue-collar people will not speak to me because I have a white shirt and tie. Do you accept yourself or do you play the game? Do you model for your kids what it's like to be yourself? And then do you turn to them and allow them to be themselves? You see, every child is a precious gem, and it's our job to polish. But a ruby is a ruby, a sapphire is a sapphire, an emerald is an emerald, and you can't make a diamond of them. Acceptance is the first condition of empowerment. Let's try another one. Right now, and this is private, Brad, you're not going to be doing this out loud in front of this group of vultures. But
Private?
Private, intimate little group of 800.
Yes,
What I want you to do is to think of a significant life failure. You're not going to say it out loud, but internally I want you to think of a grievous error that you've made in your time on the planet, something you truly regret. So many it's hard to pick, or can you think of a big one you made? A real stinker?
No.
Did you ever get in trouble as a child?
No.
Oh. Well, you're really ticking me off.
Line number 1?
Yeah. Can you dream up a time?
Okay.
All right, I want to think of this incident where you got in trouble, and I'm going to ask the question again, who are you? And this time I want you to say 3 words that a human being should never say, but for the purpose of this exercise, I want you to say, "I'm no good," as you reflect on that incident. I'm no good is the answer. Did you really do that? What you're thinking of? Did you do it? Shame on you, Brad. You liar. Who are you anyway? I'm no good. Say I'm no good. Lift as you tell me.
I'm
Who
no
are
good.
you?
I'm no good.
Who?
I'm no good.
You're 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 not any good, are you?
No.
The most debilitating idea that one can grasp even momentarily is I'm no good. But let's try the flip side. Now, Brad, I want you to think of a major life accomplishment, something you've done that you're really proud of. Got it? Okay. This time, I want you to reflect on your success. And when I say, who are you, I'd like you to respond by saying, I'm good. I'm really good. Who are you? Lift as you tell me. Who are you?
Really good.
Who are you?
I'm really good.
Who are you?
Really good.
He's back!
You feel it? I feel it. I feel it.
Oh, a condition of self-esteem is affirmation. As an adult, we often have to affirm ourselves, but children believe what they are told about themselves. Now, the problem is you and I were not trained to affirm. We were trained to critique. We were raised with an old notion. I bet you learned this one, didn't you, Brad? Weren't you taught you should never have a hole in your sock? You weren't taught that?
No.
Were you taught this? Never have a hole in your sock? Clean underwear every day? No, I have clean underwear. Trust me on that issue. I have
You
clean
want to
underwear.
see my holes?
But I was taught this one. I bet you were too. I was a thoughtful child. I complied, but I often inquired. I asked my mother, who cares about the condition of my socks and underwear? And you know what she told me, right? She said, well, son, you might be in. And that's... We all had the same mother, didn't we? Have you thought about that one? If I'm in a serious accident this very evening and rush to the emergency room, I do not want medical personnel coming near me who are squeamish about holes in socks or dirty underwear. I mean, I have a hole in my sock, and after a traumatic accident, chances are good my underwear won't be fresh either. You know what I mean? You see, I believe in the bumper sticker that reads, doo-doo occurs. Successful people make mistakes, but they respond differently to them. You know, what do you teach your child about a mistake? I know school is brutal. School is brutal because, like Brad and I, we're in the same 5th grade class, right? Every Monday morning we report to language arts class. And there to greet us on the board are 20 geek words flown in from Philadelphia. Now, that's where the super geeks live. They write our textbooks. I mean, can you imagine the personality type it takes to write a speller? But every Monday morning, Brad and I show up to the classroom and look up on the board and we see the 20 geek words of the week. Now, I didn't tell you this about Brad, but he has the gift. He is gifted. So every Monday morning, Brad looks up at the words, gets a cocky smile on his face, and says, I already know them.
I already know them.
You know them!
I do know them, yes.
And you know what Brad does all week? Absolutely nothing. And you know what school will give Brad for doing absolutely nothing? A+. I, however, look at the board and do not recognize one of the 20 as being from my mother tongue. But school has plans for me. Monday, I copy the words. Tuesday, I put them in alphabetical order. I was in Alaska recently, and I heard of a little boy who was referred to the psychologist because every time the teacher asked him to put his words in alphabetical order, he wrote gibberish on his paper. After a little dialogue with a psychologist, they came to discover the child was alphabetizing the letters within the word. Was alphabetizing his spelling list. The drill on Wednesday is we write sentences with the words. Thursday, I must compose a story with 20 totally unrelated geek words. And Friday, I take the test. But the torture works. You see, I'm learning during the week. In fact, I'm picking up one new word a day. Is that good? Well, I personally think that's good because I wonder what my vocabulary would be today if I just picked up one word a day to age 40. But at school, when I show them my 5 new words out of 20 on Friday, they will tell me I missed 75% and therefore I failed. He learned nothing, got an A. I learned something, got an F. Week 2. Week 2, we walk in and there's 20 new geek words and I'm already down 15. But I'd like to point out it doesn't matter. That was last week's list. I already missed them. And Mr. Geek Man looks at the board and once again says,
I know them.
So for the second week, the boy does nothing. We give him an A plus 2 weeks paid vacation. Now, my question to you is, are we building this gifted child's self-esteem? The answer is no. Self-esteem is built in growth, and he's not growing. And that's the trouble with a lot of our gifted kids. They don't think they've earned anything. They think it's a gift. And, you know, they'll brag. They'll say, I made an A on that test, and I didn't even study. I wrote that paper the night before. And they never are challenged until they hit college and they take their first tough course. And then you know where you can find them third week of the semester in the registrar's office dropping the course in order to protect their 4.0. No, his self-esteem's not enhanced in mine either, because you called my parents. And now not only do I go through the school torture, but every evening my Nintendo has been taken away. I don't talk on the phone on school nights. I've been taken off the soccer team. I sit at the dining room table for 45 minutes every evening with a geek list. But it works. I'm now learning 1 word a day from school torture and 1 word a day from child abuse at home. I've doubled my performance. But you know what will happen to me? On Friday, I'll take the test and I'll get 10 out of 20. And school will tell me I missed 50%. That's an F, I failed. How long will I play that game? And then, of course, at the end of the year, Brad and I get our standardized Californias, right? And they have a spelling subsection. Well, she aces and scores at the 99th percentile. I show my new learning, but it doesn't stack up in comparison to other 5th graders in the nation, and I score at the 1st percentile. You know, I'm really upset by these percentile ranks. They don't serve us well. They don't measure growth. They compare kids to each other instead of to progress. You know how they work, don't you? The 50th percentile is the midpoint. By definition, all the kids in the country score above it if the test has been appropriately normed, and half the kids score below it. Half above, half below. For every 99, by definition, there's got to be a 1. For every 98, there's got to be a 2.
But you're a geek and I'm a genius.
Oh, yeah. The number 2 is not welcome in Missoula. Or any other community for that matter, because we all want to be like woe begone where all the children are above average. It can't work that way. I heard a U.S. congressman not understanding normative data give a speech about American education, and he had the nerve to say in an angry voice, do you realize that half the children of this great land now score below the national average? Well, yes, sir, that's kind of the way averages work. And I do parent meetings on normative testing, trying to give them some insight into how these distributions work. And what I like to do is to make a chart of how tall the parents are. And what I do is I seek out the shortest parent at the meeting. And I make them stand up, and they're totally humiliated. Usually it's a lady who's about 4'10", 4'11", and she's horrified to discover she's the shortest person in the room. And I don't help any. I say, ma'am, you don't quite measure up, do you? Why don't you just sit down, short stuff? You score at the 1st percentile in height tonight. She sits down. Everyone's shocked I could treat a human being that way. We do children. Then I move up 1 inch at a time, and when I get near the midpoint, there's more folks standing up, 5'6", 5'7". Then I move away from the midpoint, and the numbers diminish, till finally I have 1 mutant. Usually a man at about 6'5", 6'6", stand up and throw out his chest in celebration of an accident of birth. He will be proud of what a deviant he is. And, you know, I hate to point it out, but when we start comparing kids to each other, we don't really do much for anybody's self-esteem. Like tonight, one of us here this evening in this auditorium is the dumbest person in this room. Would you raise your hand, please? We're the dumbest person in this room. You really need me tonight, don't you? You really need me. But most of us don't feel like we're the dumbest person in this room because we can't deal emotionally with that notion. Yet we do it to kids. I'd like to celebrate something with you about Missoula. This afternoon I had the privilege of visiting Lowell Elementary. I did. Because, you got a kid there?
No, I had one.
You had one there?
All my three kids.
What?
All three of my kids went to Lowell.
Oh, okay. Well, you know, the teachers at Lowell, of their own volition, have started a new curriculum. And the curriculum is designed to promote growth and get kids excited about learning. And one of the first things they threw out the window was grades. And you know what these teachers do? They write 2 pages of expository description of every student in their program on a quarterly basis. And then they sit down face to face with the parent to interpret that data. And something else, they don't put kids in same age groupings. Just because I was born in the same year as other human beings does not mean that they're exactly in the same place that I am. They have 2 and 3 grades in a classroom, and they meet kids where they are instead of where the geek in Philadelphia says they should be. I just applaud the courage of those teachers. I applaud the hard work of those teachers, and I applaud the parents that are behind them, because when educators come to the position that they see that the school model is crushing kids, you know who fights them oftentimes? Parents who want school to be the way it was when they went to school, when we're moving into a century that's very different than the one that prepared people the way we were prepared. All right, one more issue, Brad. This has to do with other people. What I'd like you to do right now is to think about someone on this planet that you cannot stand. I don't want to know who they are, and I don't appreciate the way you're looking at me. We just met. Sir? Can you think of someone that you don't particularly like?
No.
No? You can't? No. Have you had an argument with someone in the last year? You are not of this planet.
Mm-mm.
Can you remember the last time you got angry?
Mm-hmm.
You can.
Mm-hmm.
Can you remember the incident?
Mm-hmm.
Was another person involved? Are they here tonight? No. Yes, another person was involved. Okay, all right. Here's what I want you to do. See the lip of the balcony out there?
Yep.
I want you to use that as an imaginary movie screen. And what I want you to do, Brad, is to focus on that beige strip out there and recreate this incident that made you so angry. I want you to relive it in your imagination. Make it vivid out there. And this time, I'm not going to ask any questions. I'm just going to let you relive the incident. And as you get involved in your imagination, I'm going to say lift. And we're going to see what kind of energy was produced from this incident that found you so angry. Okay, lift. Let's see what you got. That's the weakest you've been yet, isn't it? Yeah. You know what? He had a little spurt at the beginning of the lift, and that's the adrenaline rush of anger, and then he was totally debilitated by conflict. Now I want you to think of someone you dearly love. Once again, this is private. You got it? Now look out at the balcony, and you can be doing whatever you want to do in your imagination with this person you... Just get in. Let's see if you can get it up now. I mean, lift your arm.
Are we looking ridiculous up here?
There goes the Supreme Court. Dad. Make it real. Now I say lift. You're starting without me. Okay, lift. Let's see what you have. Strongest you've been yet, right? Strongest you've been yet.
Yeah.
Strongest he's been yet, ma'am. Strongest he's been yet. That was a lot of pressure, wasn't it, boy? Yeah, a lot of pressure. Okay. Well, what we'd like to do right now is to thank you, Brad, for helping us out. Shall we affirm it for that? For yourselves and for your children, did you get the big 3? 3 things that empower human beings. Number 1, you have to have the frame of mind of acceptance. You can be yourself, accept yourself and others. Number 2, you focus on your strengths. And mistakes are only opportunities to learn. Number 3, you have to be involved in relationships of caring and minimize conflict. Now, you saw the model that I shared with you. Most of us in this room were not raised with a model of caring. Even though our parents loved us to death, they controlled us through conflict. Now, it's not their fault. I loved my parents. My parents are some of my best friends, but they messed with me. They messed with me out of love because they wanted to keep me on the right path. And you see, many of our parents came along at a time in history where this country just fought a war, World War II. And after that war, the drill sergeant model of parenting was the predominant style in American homes. The military saved the world, so it only made sense that it would prepare children. Schools were run like a military operation. And when a child was told, look, son, when I tell you to jump, there's only one thing I want to hear from you. How high, sir? Don't forget, all of our parents were officers. You see, here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to show you what's happened the last few years in American homes and schools. And in order to do that, I brought a visual aid, and this is kind of a young crowd, so I'm a little bit worried about my aid. You see the golden rope in the front of the auditorium? That is to symbolize a clothesline. Do you remember clotheslines? Do they do clotheslines in Montana? Okay, good. I don't have to explain it. When I explain the concept to young people, they're horrified. They go, you did what? You hung a rope in your yard and put your clothes on it? All of them? Even your underwear? And I go, yes, kids, but our mothers were rather clever. They would run 4 lines, put the good stuff out by the road, and work back to the underwear. My mother, when she did bras and panties, she would do sheets the same day so she could make these wonderful screens to keep the neighbors from seeing her delicates. But tonight, I want to air some dirty laundry. So I will openly hang on this line some placards that indicate what's happened in our country. You see, in the late 40s, the 50s, and the early 60s, parents in this country were convinced that you could be strict enough, that you could keep your children on the straight and narrow. And their primary strategy for helping children toe the line was punishment and fear of punishment. Did it work? Yes! We were good kids. It worked until we went on leave. You see, you have to understand what a drill sergeant is doing in boot camp. A drill sergeant is trying to change a human being from a civilian status to that of a soldier. And there are 2 things that a drill sergeant must do in order to accomplish that task. The first thing they must do is shut down a person's ability to think for themselves. Why? Because you can't afford a creative thinker in a foxhole. If an officer tells you to charge, you better not respond by saying, gee, Sarge, I wonder if the timing's right on this charge deal. What do some of the rest of you fellas think? Could we have a quick committee meeting here and see if we could arrive at a consensus? No! In battle, you must move on instinct in split second or someone will die. There are designated thinkers, Storm and Normans, and they are not on the front line. They are miles away in a quieter place where they think, plan, strategize, decide, and send the orders down the chain of command. Now, the other thing a drill sergeant must do is to shut down a person's empathies, because you can't take a soft heart into war. I mean, you can't point a gun at an enemy and say, gee, I wonder if he's got kids. Boom. Or you can't watch a buddy injured or killed beside you and stop to grieve the loss. You must toughen your heart. And so what was the routine? Oh, Chuck, is that a tear I see in your eye, son? What are you, some kind of crybaby? You're going to cry, boy. I'll give you something to cry about. We all know the line, don't we? But you know that when a soldier goes on leave, we have to have military police, because after you get out and under the thumb of authority, you tend to go wild. And that's what happened in this country. In the 40s and 50s and early 60s, we had orderly schools at home, but when these orderly kids were launched as young adults, they went wild. The 92% factor kicked in, and instead of being people who respected authority, they hated authority. They didn't trust anybody over the age of 30. They'd never been allowed to think for themselves, so their motto became, whatever turns you on, baby. And because they'd never been able to feel, they became flower children. They said, peace and love. If it feels good, do it. Now, the unfortunate part of the matter was these people had kids. And they believed in an education model, so they went out and bought an owner's manual. You know the name of it? Dr. Spock. And the 92% factor flip-flopped to the extent that this became the most permissive generation of parents that this nation has ever seen. They told their children, whatever turns you on, baby, go for it. If it feels good, do it. Let me tell you something. You can't live in a house of kids doing whatever turns them on. Someone will die. So even these permissive parents had to develop strategies to manipulate their kids. They didn't believe in punishment, so instead they used guilt. I've got to make you feel bad because you have it so good. Let me show you how that works. You're my daughter and you backtalk me. What's your name?
Mary.
Mary backtalks me. Now, the permissive parent, they get their feelings hurt just like anybody else, but they're not going to smack their kid. They're going to do something like this. Mary, darling, listen to the way you're talking to your father. Sweetheart, you know I love you, don't you, babe? Do you know what would have happened to me if I talked to my father that way? But darling, I love you too much. You know how hard I work for you to provide these things for you have here. Do you really think you have the right to talk to me that way? Guilt, 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 guilt. Or how about this one? Son, you want to borrow the car? Well, that's fine. You know your pop's attitude about the car. Your car is my car. But I'd like to review the week with you, son. You've come home 4 nights this week and asked your old man for the car. And what have my responses been? Monday, I said yes. Tuesday, I said yes. Wednesday, I said yes. Thursday, I said yes. It's Friday night, boy. Do you think it's too much to ask for your dad to have the car just one measly night a week? Guilt, 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 guilt. Another thing these permissive parents did is their kids would tick them off. But they didn't believe in expressing negative emotions. They didn't want to bruise the child's ego. So they took a lot of doo-doo off of their kids. They didn't react to it, but they remembered it. They saved their frustration and anger, just like green stamps. Remember green stamps, how we'd save them up? You know? Some psychologists call this brown stamps because, you know, they represent doo-doo. And these people would save their frustration and anger until they got 2 or 3 books. And then you could trade them in on a full-blown hissy fit. The kid comes through the door and does what they've been getting by with for 364 days, but you just got your 3rd book. So you blow up. Now, these kids know that you don't like to hurt their feelings. So when you blow up, they get very dramatic. That's when they run to their room and throw themselves on their bed, and they have this sob talk, you know, just so you can understand. You don't understand. You hurt my feelings. You don't love me anymore. It's something else. Now, my friends, if you want to screw up somebody's self-esteem, we know how. We've studied screwed up adults enough to know the very best ways. You're looking at the 2 best ways. You want to mess with somebody? Be strict and punitive. Or be permissive and lay some guilt trips on them. And then, you know what happened? These hippy-dippy types became yuppies. They had learned something from their parents. You know what it was? Hard work. And after they got through rebelling, they got jobs. They cut their hair and they shaved their beards, and they embraced a new model of permissive parenting that was wild. And where are you, Carlotta? There you are. Bless your heart, you agreed to help me out. This is your part, and you're still here. Carlotta says, I'll help you if I'm still here. Come on, help me. I want to show you. Let's run, okay? We're going to go to the stage. I want to show you what's happened now that the hippies are yuppies. They're still permissive, you guys, but they do it in kind of a different way with a flair. I'm not saying that right, Carlotta? Okay, Carlotta, let's show them how the parent of the 90s look, okay? What I want you to do is to turn your back to me and hook elbows. Have you all met my daughter, Carlotta? The child is going places. You know how I know? Because I'm taking her there. This is it. Super mom and super dad working their rear ends off. Unfortunately, the children of the country are going for a free ride. They are completely helpless, and some of them like it. Why do we do this? Because it's good for adult self-esteem. It's good for me, Carlotta. Is it good for you? Well, some kids think it's great, but most kids don't. Most kids about 2 will start kicking you. And they'll say, no. And they'll say, I can do it. And they'll say, let me down. But the reason we don't do that, Carlotta, is because it puts us both in a lot of pain. Would you hold on with your elbows? Hold on your elbows. You see, if I start to shift the weight toward her, it puts us both in a bind. You know what I mean? Ah! Oh! Stephen Glenn says this weaning process is hard on both the weenor and the weanee. It's hard not to be in the controlling, enabling position, but to be shifting the weight and the responsibility constantly toward your child. But it's an important objective, because if you keep doing it, even though it's a struggle, at some point they touch down and they stand on their own 2 feet, and they may not be home with you when they're 25. And if you've really done your job, when you start to age, it can start to go the other way. Thank you very much, Steve. Thank you. Number 1 problem in American parenting today, rescuing and enabling. People who are trying to do too much for their children instead of to teach their children to do for themselves. My friends, tonight I'm challenging you and our whole generation to, for the first time in the history of this country, find the middle ground. The answers are not on the extreme ends, but in the middle position. Let's capture the pendulum this time and not let it swing back all the way in the other direction. But we need to understand what the middle position looks like. It's something that has been called firm. Firm parents dearly love their children. They're close to their children, but their children do not walk on them. They do not do for them. They teach the children to do for themselves. The firm parent has a motto that says, say what you mean what you say, and do what you said you would do. That means we have to give up some of our best lines. Like, young lady, you will never go out again as long as you live. Or I will just die if you do that. Now, the firm parent would have to pass away. Because on the way to your funeral, your child would know you meant business. You see, this parent tried to totally control their kids. This parent tried to allow the kid to totally control themselves, but laid guilt trips on them when they did. The firm position is different. The firm position is based on consequential learning. And the primary tool for teaching is what we call a consequence. A consequence is not a punishment for a couple of reasons. One reason is a kid always knows a consequence in advance. So when they make a decision, they know what's going to happen. And in a consequence, it's logical. Punishment often isn't. Punishment, like, if you don't make your bed, I'll take away your Nintendo. Well, that does not make sense. That is not lifelike. The FBI doesn't have a housekeeping division that does random raids on American homes. And if your house is not picked up, they do not rip out your VCR. In consequential teaching, we try to teach how life will be, so the skills that we teach have application when the children are no longer with us, when our backs are turned. And it starts at age 2, when you're putting on your 2-year-old's Velcro shoes. And they reach down and slap your hands and say, Daddy, I can do it myself. Well, you're not to let your kids hit you, you know? It's not a good deal. This country's out of control with domestic violence. People need to be taught that hitting's not the answer. But you do need to say, honey, if you want to put on your shoes, that's fine. You don't have to hit Daddy. Just let me know. Go for it, babe. Now, here's the problem. Your child, I guarantee it, will make you late for something. Your child, I guarantee it, will put their shoes on the wrong foot. But the firm parent must keep their mouth shut. You know why? Because we want their little feet to pinch. Now that's very different than pinching their little feet. We allow them to pinch themselves. Because as their feet hurt, they may look at their shoes and try a better way. And come to discover something that many Americans don't know, and that is you are responsible for your own pain. Remember the old vaudeville routine? The patient comes into the doctor's office. Doctor, it hurts when I go like this. And the doctor said, don't go like that. That's what we have to teach our kids. Well, one of the best stories I ever heard about this was a teacher friend of mine who's now a nationally known consultant. Her name is Barbara Colarosa. I don't know if you've ever heard her, but she used to teach second grade in Colorado. And I saw the kids today over at the school going out on the playground. Now in Oklahoma, like, we cancel school when it rains. But up here, you send them out in the snow, right? You know? And Barbara said one of the horrors of teaching second grade was bundling up 30 little 8-year-olds for the cold. And one day she decided that she was rescuing them by putting on their clothes. And she was deciding she was the only one in the room who cared if they were bundled up or not. They didn't care. She was the only one who cared. So one day she stopped reminding. She showed up to class with a slab of frozen meat. And she held it up in front of the children and she said, boys and girls, I want to show you what happens to meat at the temperature we have outdoors today. Knock, knock, knock. Now, as your teacher, it is my responsibility to point out to you that both your hands and feet are made of meat. Now, wrap yourselves. Well, you know what always happens? Some little Chuck has never been allowed to play in the snow without mittens. I decide I'm tough enough. I go for it. I make snowballs. I make a snowman. 10 minutes later, I whine to the teacher. These kids whine. Teacher, I'm cold. Well, what Barbara learned to do was to look at them with all the love in their heart and say a magic word. She would say, oh, Chuck, that's a bummer. My goodness, your little fingers are turning purple, child. Ooh. Boy, am I glad I wore my mittens. It's cold here. Tell me, son, what will you be wearing next recess? Bummer says, I see your pain. What will you be doing next time says, I acknowledge you're responsible for your own pain. You know what that means? You have got to stop the rescue missions. I was a principal, I know. 10:30, you arrive at school. Forgotten lunch pails. Homework and notebooks. Permission slips for field trips. Yearbook money. You do it, don't you? Next time, when you get the call at 9:30, Mama, I forgot my lunch. Remember the magic word. Oh, honey, that's a bummer. Oh, yeah, it's sitting here on the counter. I see it, son, yeah. Tell you what, I'll put it in the fridge. It won't spoil. You can take it tomorrow. Won't have to make you another one then, huh? You have a nice day now. You hear? Love you. You see, we learn this with alcoholics and drug addicts. You can't be a really good alcoholic unless you have someone who loves you enough to help. And most alcoholics have that. They have someone who really cares about them, and they rescue them, and they cover up for them, and they carry out their responsibilities and allow them to stay drunk. What we've learned is what you do for somebody else, they won't do for themselves. Now, you can't always rely on life like, what if your kid doesn't clean their room? Who cares? You do! But let me tell you something about that. Your kid needs some safe places to rebel. And I've applied to the EPA to have my son's room declared a toxic dump site. And it looks like we're going to get it. And my daughter's room was the same way, but she came home one day and she said, Dad, I want some new bedroom furniture. I was just down to the mall. I saw some cute furniture for my room. I said, who would notice? Right? She said, no, Dad, you don't understand. I bought this junky old furniture. I don't care about it, but if you bought me new furniture, you know this routine, I would keep it clean every day for the rest of my life. Well, I said to her, Amer, Catherine, do you mean what you're saying to me? Oh, yes, Daddy, I mean it. And I said, I tell you what, it would be a sacrifice to the family to get that furniture, but it seems to me that it's very important to you and you're willing to make a sacrifice. You've never cleaned your room every day before. If I get the furniture, it will be done. But let me tell you something about life, dear. When people don't do their own housekeeping, most people hire it done. So your room will be cleaned every day. You can do it, or you can hire it done. That very day, my wife and I incorporated ourselves. You are looking at parental housekeeping services. You do not have to call us. Just leave it undone. We'll stop by the room. We make beds for $3. We dust for $4. We'll pick up clothes for $2.50. You can't afford us. We made statements and we put them on the door. One bed making, you know, and she hates them. One day she said to me, Dad, I wish you'd just tell me I owe you $5 instead of putting the stupid things on the door. I said, oh, honey, that's a bummer. I know how you feel, dear. I feel the same way when the MasterCard comes in every month. When you charge things, it's really uncomfortable to have to pay for them. When my son asked to borrow my car, because he has not purchased his car yet, he understands that my car does not roll when the bars close. My car is to be in the driveway before the drunks start home. So if he drives my car, that's where my car will be found by 1:30. He's 18. He also understands that if he comes in at 1:45, he's given up my car keys for 2 weeks. Do I get mad? No. I'm glad to have the automobile back. I just say, son, I respect your decision to leave the car at home for a couple of weeks. It'll be real handy to you and my mom and your mom and me. You know what he says? Don't respect me, I've got a date Friday night. I say, that's a bummer. But I'm sure you'll work something out. And I'll be happy for you to have the car January 15th. You guys, the only way America is going to save this generation is to instill in them courage, individuality, decision-making skills, and responsibility. You see, you and I haven't learned to do that. And one day I realized that when I read a poem. I realized that the kids that I was dealing with at school and the kids in my home, I really wasn't treating them in a firm way. I still had a lot of drill sergeant in me. And I came across this poem that changed my life, and I want to share it with you. It's called How Do I Learn Just Who I Am? And it comes from a book called Listening to the Littlest. It was written by a lady by the name of Ruth Reardon. And what Ruth tried to do was to write poetry from a kid's perspective. And so when I read these words to you, I don't want you to hear them from the voice of an adult. I want you to imagine your own child saying these words to you. How do I learn who I am? I learn from you who I am. Within your eyes, I see reflected me. Within your voice, I hear how you see me. You are the mirror that I look into and mold the image of myself. Whenever you touch me, I feel my form and my shape. And if I like what I see in your eyes, hear in your voice, feel in your touch, my heart will respond and reach out. Then in its reaching, I grow and grow until finally I see myself as separate from you. But that separate self, in turn, can love you back because you taught me who I am. And I'm loved. The line in that poem that haunted me, my friends, is the one that says, you are the mirror that I look into to mold the image of myself. From that day forward, I had this image of there being a mirror laminated to my forehead. And every time I interacted with a child, they weren't looking at me. They were looking at themselves through the way I treated them. And for those of you who are educators, you may have heard something in this poem that we never shared with the parents. Educators, did you hear learning styles in this poem? How do I learn who I am? I see it in your eyes. I hear it in your voice. I feel it in your touch. Parents, we never told you about this. But we educators had a war about 20 years ago. It was a war launched by little old lady first grade teachers. This book came out that was entitled Why Johnny Can't Read. It was an indictment of our schools. And quite frankly, we in elementary school got rather defensive about it. We were upset that kids weren't learning to read, so we decided to launch an all-out campaign on illiteracy. We formed an army, and we picked as our primary weapon an instructional strategy known as phonics. We were determined that every child in this country would know all of their letters and their corresponding sounds and would forevermore be hooked on phonics. Now, during this period in our history, you could walk into any first grade classroom and you would see and hear the same thing. Little 6-year-olds huddled around the reading table for mutual support, sounding something like this. Ro, a, to. Ro-a-to. 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 Recta. Recta. Rats! 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 And then it was on to the next word, and the process would begin once more. The rat wo-e-inta. Wo-e-inta. The rat wo-yinta. The rat wo-yinta. Oh, the rat went! And you guys, it could take weeks to read a stupid little first grade story. And after about 5 years of this campaign, another group of little old lady first grade teachers called time out. They said, wait a minute, don't you think we're making the children sound a wee bit weird? And have you ever noticed, by the time they reached the period, they forgot what the sentence was all about? Don't you think it would make more sense to teach our kids R-A-T spells rat, just say rat and be on with that? So they developed a new strategy. It was called see and say. You see it, you say it, that's all there is to it. And their primary weapon was a little reading series known as Dick and Jane. Remember this one? Where children thrilled to the exploits of this family that did lots of running and jumping. And this little Hummer moved along at a dizzying pace, sometimes adding 1 and 2 new words per book. The kids would go home at night all pumped up going, Mama, tomorrow we get a new book and I hear Sally's going to skip. I mean, it was hard to sleep at night with these cliffhangers. And our reading conventions during this period of time had the generals of the two armies form panels of experts and go at each other in public. It was ugly. So finally we did enough research to determine who was right. You know who was right? Both of them. You see, some kids learn most of what they learn through their ears. It's true of adults too. They're called auditory people. But others of us learn better through their eyes. They're called visual people. Phonics work for the auditory. See and say work for the visual. We call it the truth. We started teaching reading both ways and all the children of America learn to read, right? No. There's another way to learn, and these kids don't grow up to be teachers unless they're coaches. These are people who learn on the move by doing it. They don't grasp the concept of the letter A till they picked up a block shaped like the letter A and heaved it at somebody. Then you ask them, you know what an A is? Oh yeah, I nailed Johnny the one yesterday. Call him right up. These kids are called kinesthetic learners. Thomas Edison was one of these kids, by the way. They kicked him out of school. 3rd grade. His 3rd grade teacher said he would never amount to anything. I don't remember her name, do you? But speaking of giving people drugs, ma'am, we drug these kids into their seats so they'll sit still and pay attention. Unless you're real creative, like my teacher friend Bill Page from Nashville, he said, shoot, whenever I got one of these hypers in my class and I made out my chart, I would just assign them 2 seats. Well, I would say, young man, you ought to be in one of your seats or on the way at all times, you understand me? So if the kid's up and around the room, he's got a dignified answer. I'm just going to my other seat. We didn't tell you parents this. This may be driving you crazy. Adults and kids don't always match in terms of their perceptions of reality. You see, some of us are visual. I am visual. Who else is visual? God bless you. We are superior. In my view.
The way we work is we've got a shoulder-mounted video camera, and we make videos of life, and we can replay them whenever we want to on the monitor screens of our mind. But some of you, dadgum, you are auditory. You learn by hearing. Where are you? I hate you very much. No, I don't hate you. I don't hate you, but I don't always get along with you. You see, you don't have a video camera. You have a microphone, and you make cassettes. Now, how do you get on my nerves? You remember every word I ever said. And then you get in my face and you say, Chuck, don't you remember when you said? Well, frankly, I don't. I'm a busy man, and I say lots of things. But you always remind me. Now, another thing that annoys me about the auditory is they're all too eager to play their whole stupid cassette. My mother is auditory, and you ask the woman a simple question, she's got to play the whole tape. Mother, how was your evening? Well, takes in a lot of air. We went to dinner with your brother. And I said, and your father said, and I said, and your father said, and I said, and your father said, and your brother interrupted. You know how the boy interrupts. And I said, and your father. I go, Mom, don't you even have a fast-forward feature? What is the point of the story? And then the other thing that annoys me about the auditory is you have to tell them every stupid thing. You can't leave anything to the imagination. My 18-year-old boy's auditory, and I go, son, I got a plane in 2 hours. Would you throw my clothes in the dryer? Well, he does this. But I go to the dryer an hour later and find wet clothes. I go, Jason, I got a plane. My clothes are wet. He said, you didn't say to turn it on. You see, we visual people, we see these buttons and dials and assume something needs to be done there. The kinesthetic kid has taken the dryer apart 3 times. They know how. But the auditory must be told. And then your kinesthetic people, they're physical and they move, and we all have all 3, but they're rank ordered in us. My number 2 is kinesthetic, as you've probably ascertained. We are on the move. We touch the world, we interact physically with the world, and we get upset and we experience it as a knot in our stomach that we can feel. And another thing that's kind of interesting is if you listen to the way a person expresses themselves, they'll give you verbal clues about their learning style. You know what we visual people say? We say, I see. Mm-hmm. I see your point. Uh-huh. I can picture that. I have a clear vision of what we need to accomplish this weekend as a family. We get visions, we do. But you auditory people, you use hearing words. Oh, I heard that. Mm-hmm. I hear you talking. Or the sophisticated will say, now, Frank, what I hear you saying is... But the kinesthetic people, they get the trophy for the best vocabularies. They'll say, baby, I know how that feels. I was touched by what the man said. He moved me. But I was able to grasp his key points. Now, the wild thing is, you can go into any American home and you see parents don't understand this. Like you might have a parent putting away the groceries, and the kid comes up from behind and says, Daddy, Daddy, guess what? To which the parent says, what? The kid will say, Daddy. The parent will say, what? The kid will say, Daddy, guess what? You say, what is it? The kid will say, Daddy. You go, what, for heaven's sake? Now, you know why there's that problem. The father is auditory. When he says what, he's saying the channels are open, proceed, child. But the kid is visual, and he's looking for an opening. You see, his eyes tell him you're too busy for him. Or his eyes tell him that the groceries are more important than anything he might have to say. I had a friend working in the garage, and his little 4-year-old daughter was following him around. Daddy, 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 Daddy. He was going, what? Finally, he reached over to pick up a wrench, and she clamped onto his cheeks. And she said, Daddy, listen to me with your eyes. You see, we visual people, we like eye contact. We don't like you in our face or over us. And if you walk through the room saying, turn off the Nintendo, it's time for dinner, we didn't get it. You have to break the visual plane with us. Now, auditory kids, you know, you have to tell them everything. You have to tell them you love them. I got a brother who's 35, and if you don't tell the man you love him enough, he does surveys. You know, people like this. We'll be at my mother's house. He'll go, Mama, do you love me? Honey, do you love me? Brother, do you love me? Son, do you love me? And we have to go, yes, yes, we love you, dadgummit. Can't you see that? No, he can't see it. He's got to hear it. And did you hear the tone of my voice? Oh, we've studied tone of voice. If there's a difference between your words and your tone of voice, they believe only the tone. I'm not upset, all right? Whatever you want to do, I don't care. You know it's bad. We've studied American families. We mostly bark at our kids, you know? We only talk to each kid 14 and a half minutes a day, and 12 of those are negative. You know how negative is? You know the number one way American parents tell their kids it's time for dinner? It sounds like this. Get in the car! We bark and we snap, and then we have another big problem. I can't talk about this. I have to demonstrate this because this is kinesthetic. Stand up. Everybody stand up. Visual people, that's like this. You unbend your knees. Now turn and face that wall. Now don't cross the aisles, but extend your two hands and place them on the two shoulders you find now in front of you. Would you give that person a neck rub? They've had a very long day. Oh, that feels good. Ask for what you need. Ask for what. No, Brad, not that. Okay, now turn the other way and give it back. Listen to your purr. Okay, now shut up. Do not make any sounds. Do not say a word. What I want you to do is to say thank you for that neck rub with a hug. Will you hug the people who rubbed your neck and sit back down quickly? Hug them and sit down. No, we got problems. Help me. What's your name?
Michelle.
Michelle, help me. No, sit down. Sit down. Michelle, run up on stage. Run up. I was hoping I wouldn't have to do this. Michelle's going to help me out. Michelle, they need help in this auditorium. It's a very American crowd, Michelle.
Yeah.
You see, when I told them to rub necks, they did fine. You see, they were out there pumping and heaving and having a great time. But when I told this crowd to hug Michelle, they went into physical gyrations. Some of them approximated a hug, but never quite completed the act. And I want to show them how they looked. Michelle, the number one hug I saw in this auditorium was one called the American A-frame. Do you know that one? It's where you make the letter A by leaning in from your ankles and hugging. Number one hug in this auditorium. You only see that in the United States of America. You know why we do that? It's because we're holding our sex parts back. I don't know why it is, but in this country we have trouble with non-sexual affirmation. You know, we don't know how just to hug somebody and not have anything sexual in it, so we're so afraid of someone getting the wrong idea, we hold them back. And men, you guys, you made the mistake of sitting by each other. Oh, yeah. You had this macho problem, didn't you? And Michelle, the way the men hugged, they had this swagger. And they did one called the Western Side Saddle. You know that one? It's where you just kind of bump hips. Oh, yeah. I like him, but not that much. And then some of the rest of you, you're not comfortable with intimacy for very long, and I can see it in your behavior. Because, Michelle, some people in this auditorium, when they moved in for the hug, they were already planning how they could get out of it. You know, and what these people will do is they'll grab hold of your shoulder and get a good push-off point. And then typically they use their other hand as a built-in hug timer. And they count out a beat on your back. Now, in this country, the national average is 3 beats. It goes pat, 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 push, and they are done. It's a shame, my friends, because we find there is a psychological need to be affirmed physically. And Virginia Satir, a dear family psychologist for many years, who's passed away now, used to say, it takes 4 hugs a day to stay alive, 8 hugs a day to maintain your mental health. That's just holding on to whatever you presently possess. But 12 hugs a day to grow as a human being. And you know, I think the reason that we lead the industrialized world in teenage pregnancy is that the only way our kids know to be affirmed is to go to bed together. They don't get enough non-sexual affirmation. Michelle, do you feel anything sexual in this?
No.
Nothing? Nothing?
No. sorry.
Well, she didn't. It's a non-sexual affirmation. And you know, I hate sexual harassment, and I really think that our national attention being drawn to that is very important. But I'm afraid. I'm afraid that in an effort not to harass, we'll go to the other end of the continuum, which is not to interact. And there's a middle ground, an affirming middle ground. You see, someday an archaeologist is going to dig up an old rusty automobile from our generation and carefully whisk away the dirt from the bumper to reveal a sticker that says, "Have you hugged your child today?" What will they say about us? During this period of time in American history, they had to remind each other on the bumpers of their vehicles to touch their offspring on a semi-regular basis. I don't want to be remembered like that, do you? Thank you, Michelle.